Hi folks, Deacon Ed McCormick here on this beautiful spring afternoon. And we have just begun Holy Week. Yesterday was Palm Sunday, where we heard Matthew's account of Jesus' arrest and crucifixion. And on Friday, which will be Good Friday, we'll hear John's account of those same events. And during this week, a very challenging question can appear in the minds of many folks, and that is, why did Jesus have to die this way? Why did he have to endure this horrific set of events? Couldn't he have just died of a heart attack? Would it have made a difference? Now, what's clear is the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all tell the story of Jesus' Jesus' life climaxing with his arrest and crucifixion. And Paul's gospel, when you read Paul's letter, especially his letter to the Corinthians, he says, I preach nothing but Christ crucified. So for the four gospels and for Paul, the death of Jesus is central to our faith. And for our liturgical year, our liturgical year climaxes with Good Friday and Easter Sunday. So our liturgy also says that Jesus' death and resurrection is central to our faith. So why does Jesus have to die this way? Now, people raise this question because I think they have some legitimate concerns. First of all, there is a sense in the popular mind that Jesus had to die this way because somehow God is angry with humanity for sinning, and this angry God has to be appeased, and so Jesus dies in our place. Sometimes you'll hear this called penal substitution. And what people don't like about this is that this angry God who demands Jesus' death doesn't seem to square with the God of love and mercy and forgiveness that the rest of the gospel speaks about. And people are quite right about this. Now, what's interesting is when you read through the Gospels and when you read through Paul's letters, you really find no evidence of God the Father being depicted as this angry, raging God who demands payment, who demands some kind of substitution. You get many, many different images that speak about the power and significance of Jesus' death, but what's absent from all of them is any angry God. In fact, in Paul's letter to the Romans chapter 5, he says that while we were God's enemies, God loved us and having Christ die for us. So Paul sees, and in fact the entire New Testament sees, the death of Jesus as this act of love on God's part. So why did Jesus have to die this way? Well, some people want to say, didn't he just give us a demonstration of what love looks like? But the cross is far more than a demonstration. It's something that Jesus underwent. It's this horrific event. And so I want to suggest to you that for us to appreciate the significance of Jesus' death and why he had to die this way, we have to appreciate the problem that he is trying to solve. We have to appreciate the problem that plagues human history and all of us, and that the cross somehow becomes the solution to this problem. If you don't grasp the scope and depth of the problem, then you cannot appreciate the significance of the cross and why Jesus had to die this way. So let me just give you a few hints as to the scope of the problem. Let me first turn to St. Paul. When Paul surveys humanity, and including the entire Roman Empire, he sees the problem loud and clear. What he sees are all of humanity created to praise and reverence and serve God. And what Paul finds is that we're serving creatures. We're creating all these idols that we worship. We're creating all these forces that we serve. And what they do is these idols, these creatures, these powers, in our serving them, they enslave us. And so we serve the forces of lust. We serve the gods of war. We serve the idols of power and lust and wealth and domination. And all of these forces, when we serve them, enslave us. And when they enslave us, they drive us to do all kinds of distorted and destructive things. And fundamentally, these forces are corrupting and co-opting, and even our best desires and our gifts and abilities can get co-opted and twisted by these forces. And what they end up doing is rupturing relationships, because these enslaving forces cause us to get into rivalries with each other. And these rivalries, whether they're interpersonal, whether they're communal or international, are very destructive. And they ultimately lead us to start scapegoating groups and peoples. And we're caught in this bondage. We're caught in these deadly forces that we can't get out of. There's a wonderful scene in C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia that captures this enslavement. He tells this story of this young boy who comes across this beautiful lake, and at the end of the lake is a cave. And in the cave, he finds all kinds of jewelry and gold and money, and he begins to try and take it all. And he tries to take as much of the gold and jewelry as he could. And he leaves the cave, and as he leaves the cave, he notices that he has been transformed. And he looks into the lake and sees his reflection. He's no longer a young boy. He's a dragon. Because as Lewis ironically points out, the boy forgot that dragons are greedy, and dragons always steal and store money and gold and jewelry. And he's become a dragon, and he's terrified. He takes the newfound claws that he has and begins to rip this dragon skin off, one after another, and the dragon skin keeps growing on him. He tries one arm after another, and even as he tries to rip off this dragon skin, it keeps growing. And Lewis's point is, when we worship idols, when we worship all kinds of destructive forces, we are powerless to free ourselves from them. And so, my friends, this is the problem that plagues humanity. And the tentacles of these destructive forces that cause rivalries and scapegoating and violence and murder, that lead us to drug trafficking, that lead us to sex trafficking, that lead us to endless wars. These forces we are not capable of freeing ourselves from. And these forces plague our families and schools and workplaces and friendships. And so what's happening on the cross is Jesus is entering willingly into these destructive forces and allowing them to do their worst. And he is acting like this Trojan horse, if you will, where this human being filled with the fullness of God enters into these forces to begin to free us from them by exposing them for what they are, by revealing to us what they do to us. And by entering into them, he begins to free humanity from them. And the good news, my friends, is that we can tap into this freedom. He can enter into the deepest, darkest parts of our shame and our embarrassment and our distorted ways, and he can free us. And this is why this horrific event of Good Friday is actually good news. See you in the next video.